A massive shout out to the Genin tier member of this channel. Thank you Aliyah Rav, your support means a lot. If you would like your name mentioned in every video, as well as receiving special perks and soon having early access to new series, consider becoming a member of this channel by hitting that join button. There's a rumor going around. If you like this video and subscribe, you will learn how to pick up a girl in a dungeon. If you become a member, you will inherit all of Belcranel's abilities. Hi guys, this is the next part of What If Natsu Was the Son of Acnologia? I hope you enjoy. Everyone in the room watched Natsu with wide eyes. So that's magic that Natsu eats, Wendy said with odd expression. Urza looked at her surprised. You didn't know that? Wendy shook her head. No. Every time I asked him which magic he eats, he would have always answer. One. Wendy then smiled. I guess it have more sense now. Urza and the others smiled. That's Natsu for ya, Gray said as he looked back at Natsu, who was still standing in front of them facing Hades. With Natsu asterisk. Ah, this feeling is wonderful. It's been too long since I ate magic. I should do it more often, Natsu thought as he grinned at that idea. He looked at his body. Almost all of the wounds were already closed and restored magic started dancing around him, with black aura in shape of the dragon appearing behind him, roaring soundless bloodthirsty roar at everyone around it. Hades was already in fighting stance, ready to fight. Natsu didn't wait as he lunged himself at Hades. He jumped in the air and spined, hitting Hades in his neck. Hades flied few meters and then flipped in the air, sending magical bullets from his right hand, and from his left hand he shoot his chains that warped around Natsu's leg. Natsu protected himself from bullet by warping his wings around his body. Hades, seeing his chance, sent another chain and it warped itself around Natsu, who still had his wings warped around himself. Hades pulled the chain smiling. His smile soon vanished though, when Natsu broke his chains easily by spreading his wings, lifting himself in the air, breaking both chains that were warped around him. While Natsu was in the air, he chanted, Chaos Dragon's Roar. Hades dodged the attack as it flew by him harmlessly. You'll have to try harder then. He stopped when he saw that Natsu had disappeared from the spot he was just second before. Chaos Dragon's Iron Fist, Natsu said, appearing from his chaotic void, right behind Hades, hitting him directly. Hades flew away and crashed in the wall. Natsu lunged himself at Hades, who barely had enough time to duck under Natsu's feet that flew over his head. Natsu's leg pierced trough the wall, destroying part of it. Hades from underneath Natsu shoot another bullet from his finger, but Natsu leaned back with his head touching the floor, his legs still in the air with one still in the broken wall. Bullet flew few millimeters from Natsu's nose. Hades saw that his attack missed and jumped back just in time to avoid Natsu's Chaos Dragon's Claw, that broke the rest of the wall while getting his leg out as well. After Natsu finished his attack, he jumped back, and now both mages watched each other in complete silence. They stood there for few moments with Hades panting and Natsu standing straight, watching Hades with predator eyes. On some unseen sign, they launched themselves at each other once again. Fast exchange of different kicks and blows proceed afterwards. Even Urza had hard time following them. It lasted for few seconds before Natsu kicked Hades in the leg, making him fall on his back. Natsu lit his hand with his magic and Hades barely had time to roll aside before Natsu's fist crushed the floor where his skull used to be. Hades tired to cast another Amaterasu on Natsu, but he didn't have enough time since Natsu sent another tornado of black and blue energy toward him. This time he wasn't so lucky and wasn't able to avoid the attack completely as it hit his shoulder. Natsu landed on the ground since he was in the air when casting that Chaos Dragon's Roar. He looked up at Hades, who was grinning and laughing like madman. Natsu raised an eyebrow with bored expression. You finally lost it, old man, huh? Natsu asked and sighed. Such power, such monstrous strength, such beautiful magic, Hades said, laughing, and then he looked at Natsu, who was standing there with his magic still raising. Hades held out his hand and said, come with me. I can give you more power than you could ever imagine in your wildest dreams. Urza, Gray, Lucy and Wendy widened their eyes and looked at Natsu, who was smirking while looking at Hades. He was standing there in front of Hades for few moments. Sorry guys, Natsu started as he walked to Hades. Wendy felt like someone penetrated her heart with hot knife. Lucy was on verge of crying while thinking, how can he do this to us? Urza and Gray clenched their fist in fury. That traitor. I finally started believing that he is part of this family. Does we mean nothing to him? Does Mira means nothing to him? Natsu walked to Hades and raised his clawed hand like he will put it in Hades's, but instead of putting his hand in Hades's he swung it down. Hades's eyes widened in shock as floor was stained red. Others looked at Natsu in disbelief as he grinned wickedly and licked his blood-stained claws. Hades looked at his arm that was held out. Well, at least where it used to be. His arm was currently on the floor few meters to the right and from his shoulder dripped blood. Quote, "You will have to put up with me a little longer," Natsu finished and grinned at shocked Hades. Others let out a sigh of relief. That idiot, Gray thought. How dare you, how dare you, you insolent brat, Hades roared as he raised his remaining hand in gun-like position and fired at Natsu, who was barely a meter away from him. Hades grinned, thinking that there is no way Natsu will able to avoid it. Imagine his face when Natsu flicked his magic bullet with tip of his tail like it was nothing more than some annoying fly and yawned. You are boring, Natsu said in monotone voice. Hades took a step back. How did you do that? Simply, it's not that hard to kill a fly, now, is it? Natsu said, looking at his claws, not even caring about Hades's finger on his forehead. Hades's face turned red from anger as he fired his bullet straight in Natsu's head. Natsu, Wendy yelled as smoke engulfed Hades and Natsu. You really think that something like this can kill a demon? Natsu asked from smoke. Hades's eyes filled with horror. The smoke cleared and revealed Natsu standing there holding Hades's finger in his hand. Hades's mouth opened like he wanted to say something but quickly shut them up when he saw Natsu's wicked grin splitting his face and his dragon-like eyes shining red with bloodlust. This hand of yours, this is the one you used to shoot Lucy, me, and tried to shoot Wendy, right? Natsu asked, still holding Hades's finger. Hades, gaining back some of his arrogance, said, so, what are you going to do about it? Natsu shook his head and sighed, his expression full of mocking pity. That arm really annoys me. Like it's calling me to break it, Natsu hissed as he spun Hades's finger, and there was loud cracking sound of bones as Hades paled. Ah! A scream that was heard all over the island escaped his mouth as he fell on the floor with his broken arm lying on the ground in completely unnatural position. Do you have to be so loud, damn it? I just started, for crying out loud, Natsu said, stepping on Hades's head and pushing his face down until it collided with ground. How can you be so strong? Hades said. His voice was muffled since his face was pushed in the ground. Natsu put his elbow on the knee of the leg that was on Hades's head like he was thinking, and after few moments he just shrugged. I would say that Acnologia is a good teacher. But more likely the answer is, I visited the hell and returned with a gift. Natsu then moved his feet from Hades's head. Hades looked up while slowly getting back in sitting position while Natsu turned his back and looked like he was about to walk away. Hades was about to let out the sigh of relief, but then Natsu turned in the blink of an eye with his leg warped in black and red energy, hitting Hades in face, breaking his nose and sending him flying. Arg! Hades cried out as he collided with the floor. Do you really think I would let you go so easily? Natsu asked with madness shining in his eyes, his sharp teeth showing. Hades looked at Natsu while standing up. Natsu lit his leg with black and blue energy before Hades could stand up completely and kicked Hades in the leg with all strength he could muster, breaking it like a toothpick. Hades screamed again. Urza and others had to cover their ears, and Wendy and Lucy even closed their eyes, unable to watch as Natsu's clawed fingers warped around Hades's neck and his other arm pierced trough his demon's eye. Blood sprayed his face and floor. Now you'll have a reason to wear that eye patch of yours, Natsu said as he let go of barely conscious Hades. Hades fell on the ground looking at Natsu with dull eyes. Monster, Hades said quietly. I'm sick of you humans, Natsu said, his expression darkened. You call me a monster and you not even once considered to look at yourselves. Yes, it's truth. I killed many. But why? You must ask yourself. I was forced to do that so many times until I started enjoying it. But you know what else is truth? You killed as well. Did someone force you to do that? I think the answer is no, Natsu started as he sat down in Indian style next to Hades. Hades shivered when Natsu cracked his knuckles. Most of you are so pitiful, Natsu said, and then magic warped around him. It's making me sick. His voice started to return back to normal as he transformed back to his human form. You're afraid of death, Natsu said, or is it life that you're afraid of? I don't understand humans at all. Natsu raised his hand toward Hades's head, preparing for final blow. Wait, don't kill him, Urza shouted. Natsu turned his head to Urza. his cold dragon-like eyes sending chills trough her spine. Why? Natsu deadpanned. Urza froze. She didn't expect that question. She opened her mouth to reply but closed them quickly, unable to find any words. Because no matter what other people say, you are not a monster, Gray said instead of Urza. Natsu's eyes widened almost unnoticeable while he barely hid his surprise behind his cold, emotionless mask. Others nodded and Lucy said, prove them all that they are wrong and let him live. Natsu's eyes traveled to Wendy, who noticed it. She smiled and nodded reassuringly. Natsu lowered his hand and gazed at Hades, who watched this in shock. Looks like it's your lucky day, Hades, Natsu said, and then added with thoughtful expression, can you answer me one question? Why are you humans afraid of death? The fear of death follows from the fear of life. A man who lives fully is prepared to die at any time. It's as simple as that. Hades's eyes traveled to Natsu's face, studying it. It was expressionless mask he always wore. Despite his situation, Hades chuckled. Natsu was right and there was no denying it. I think we are afraid that we will be forgotten. Another meaningless name carved in stone. Hades said. Carve your name on hearts, not tombstones. A legacy is etched into the minds of others and the stories they share about you. After saying that, Natsu stood up, dusted his pants, which were the only thing left of his clothes, and turned to walk away toward his shocked guildmates. However, before he could walk away, Hades asked him one last question, aren't you afraid of death? A dead body is much more fascinating than a live one, and I have learned that most corpses tell better stories. Natsu turned and walked away, not caring about looks of surprise and terror others gave him. He bent down next to Wendy, who was still sitting on the ground, and asked her, can you stand up? I can try but I'm not sure, Wendy said, and tried to get up only to almost fall right back on her face when she lifted her body off of the floor. Natsu catch her and lifted her of the ground, putting her on his back. Wendy smiled and rested her head on his shoulder. Can any of you stand up? He asked, looking at Gray, Urza, Laxus, who waked up some time ago, and Lucy. Urza was able to stand up with the help of her sword. Laxus stood up swaying slightly backward and forwards. Gray followed Laxus but Lucy couldn't because Hades shoot a bullet trough her leg. Not bothering to look at Gray, he said, Gray. Gray straightened his back when his name was said. You'll carry Lucy to the camp. Hi, Gray said and went to help Lucy. Thanks, she said when Gray came closer. No problem, let's go, Natsu said but was interrupted by sudden scream. Naatsuuuuuuuuu. They all turned around to see Happy, Lily and Charla being chased by at least 20 soldiers that had grimoire hearts symbols on them. Before Natsu could do a thing, someone else shouted, hold it right there. Natsu turned to see Makarov, Evergreen, Elfman, Gajiel, Bixlow, Freed, Kana, Levy, Lizana and even Mira Jane standing there. He smiled when he saw Mira Jane there. Warmth filled his heart at the thought that she was okay. Members of Grimoire Heart saw this and stopped. There is more of them, one screamed. Is that Makarov? Other asked. Hey, look there. Master Hades is defeated, another shrieked. You have 3 seconds to get off of this island, Makarov said. He didn't have to say it twice as everyone ran away. They stood there for few seconds with cold looks on their faces until last member of Grimoire Heart disappeared. After that, Makarov smiled before all of them except Natsu, who just smiled, cried out in delight. Makarov looked at Laxus and said, it's good to have you back. Others quieted down to listen. Did you think I was gonna say something like that? Shut up, old man, Laxus said, putting fingers in his ears. Other dragon slayers followed his example. Laxus, Freed said, not believing his eyes. Laxus. Thunder God tribe cried in union and launched themselves at him, hugging him. You okay? Someone asked Mira from behind her back. She smiled and turned around. I'll be fine, she answered to Natsu, who scanned her from head to toe. You're worrying too much. You should worry about yourself for a change, she said, laughing. I'm not worried, he muttered, looking away. Oh please, do you think I don't know you? She asked, smiling, and then she moved closer and kissed him. Natsu's eyes widened slightly before he returned the kiss. Laxus gaped. His eyes traveled to Freed, who was nodding knowingly. They started dating few months after you were kicked out, Elfman grumbled, explaining. He still wasn't too happy about it. Natsu was currently putting Wendy down again while Mira looked over her wounds. They were talking about something but not even Laxus could hear what it was about. Few hours later everyone were back in camp. Laxus was talking with Thunder God tribe, Gajiel was with Levi and Lily, Wendy was healing some of the most injured members with Urza and Lizana helping her, Charla, Happy, Gildarts were eating, Kana and Lucy were somewhere not too far away taking a bath, Gray was hiding from Juvia who was talking with Merity while trying to find him. Mira was sitting under some old oak tree knitting necklaces from flowers when Altair walked to her. "Would you mind if I join you?" she asked. Mira smiled at her and said, "Sure, why would I?" Altair smiled gratefully. "So, where is Natsu?" Mira just pointed her finger upwards toward treetop of the oak. Altair looked up. On the highest branch of the tree Natsu sat with his back resting on the tree trunk, looking like Ha was asleep while in reality one of his eyes was closed and other half open looking at horizon like he was waiting something. No one, not even Mira could tell from that distance just how troubled he really was. Zirf was on this island. True he couldn't smell him anymore so most likely he'd get away again but the fact Zirf was here could easily mean that his father was coming. If that happens, he didn't even want to think about it. Is he asleep? He could hear Altair ask. I don't know. Probably yes, Mira replied. Natsu smirked. Is it true? I mean was he really raised by Acnologia? Altair asked. Mira looked up at Natsu and sighed, yes. Are you afraid of him? Altair looked at her and blinked before she burst out laughing. Mira looked at her surprised and Natsu almost fell from his branch. Why would I be afraid of him? Should I? She asked. Mira laughed. No, of course not. It's just, many people are afraid of him because of that. Altair looked at her flower necklace and said, it must be lonely sometimes. If everyone is afraid of you, right? Or is he a loner? He seems that way though. Let me tell you this. If you meet a loner, no matter what they tell you, it's not because they enjoy solitude. It's because they have tried to blend into the world before, and people continue to disappoint them. A voice said behind them. Altair jumped slightly and Mira Jane smiled happily. Hey master, she greeted. Yo, he said smiling. His eyes traveled to Altair. Altair saw this and after few minutes of silence she asked, do you want us to leave? She thought by use, her and Merity. Makarov chuckled. Why would we want that? Altair looked surprised. Aren't you afraid that I could attack you any moment? Will you? He asked. Altair shocked her head. Of course not. So why wouldn't we trust you? He asked. You trust me? She asked in disbelief. Natsu trusts you and that is enough for me, Mira said happily. Altair's eyes filled with tears. They are all so kind. Do you want to come to Fairy Tale with us? Makarov asked. Altair looked stunned. After she registered what Makarov just asked her she asked him, can Merity come with me? Makarov laughed. She asked the same thing for you when I asked her this question, so that means, she was crying by now. A silent thud behind her was heard though Altair didn't notice. Myris and Makarov's smile widened. Welcome to family, Altair. Altair turned to look at Natsu who was standing behind her smiling. She wiped her tears. Merity walked toward her since she heard last part of the conversation. She hugged Altair and said as she too started crying, Altair. Altair looked at her and mumbled quiet, huh, I think we found our home, I think so too, those around them smiled. Makarov turned toward his children. Hey brats, he yelled attracting their attention, we have 2 new members. Everyone cheered. Natsu was smiling as he walked to Mira and hugged her from behind. The wind came from the sea, unnoticed by others. Natsu however noticed the scent it carried. His eyes widened as he jumped back from Mira shocking her. He shouted as loud as he can, everyone. Shut your ears. They looked quizzically at him but seeing the look he gave them they knew something serious is going on and they did as they were told. Not even a second later a bloodthirsty roar rocked the sky. R-O-O-O-O-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-R, what was that? Merity asked. Wendy's and Gajiel's eyes widened in horror. Dragon, they said in union. A dragon? Gray cried out in disbelief. Why didn't I notice his scent before? That thought rang tough Natsu's head over and over. Dark shadow flew above them. Not just any dragon, Natsu said and everyone looked at him. A strong gust of wind almost blew them away as dark figure landed on the island in front of them with another roar that was even louder than the last one. It's been a while, father, Natsu said to the black dragon in front of him. Acnologia let out another ear-splitting roar. He then loomed over them and looked Natsu directly in the eyes. Gaki, Acnologia grumbled with annoyed look, why don't you move out of my way? It wasn't a request, it was an order. I won't, Natsu retorted coldly. Acnologia raised his scaly eyebrow with an amused look on his face. Oh, and why is that? On this island is something very valuable to me, Natsu said with little hesitation that didn't go unnoticed by others. Acnologia laughed cruelly. You can't possibly be talking about this, ants. He was referring to Mira and the others. He looked at Natsu, and after Natsu didn't deny it, he narrowed his eyes. Anger building inside his chests. You naive fool, Acnologia roared and trashed his tail right next to Natsu, who didn't even flinched. Did you forgot everything I thought you? Do I need to repeat myself? Acnologia hissed out the last part as he lied down his enormous head in front of Natsu. Natsu's eyes widened as picture of a certain fire dragon appeared in front of his eyes. Quote, You are more than opponent. You're a rival, and I hope, a friend. A young boy with pink hair said. Dragon covered in flames replied with smile, that is true. My friend, Acnologia, please, please don't. All I wanted was a friend. Please don't kill him. Acnologia. Daadd. Boys' cries echoed through the forest. What Natsu did next made everyone in Fairy Tail gasp in horror. Natsu threw himself on his knees, his head on the floor as he bowed to the dragon, who raised his head once again, smirking evilly. There is no need to repeat yourself, Your Majesty, Natsu said. Myra's eyes filled with tears. That wasn't Natsu she knew. Her Natsu wouldn't bow to anyone. He always stood in front of them, his head high. That teen in front of her wasn't Natsu. Then get off of this island, now. So I can destroy it and be done with it, Acnologia said, satisfied. Natsu, Mira called out as tears rolled down her cheek. Natsu heard satisfaction in Acnologia's voice. He also felt his guild members' friend's eyes at the back of his head. Sudden anger flared inside of him. He stood up. I will have to disobey this order, my king, Natsu said, his magic warping around him. Acnologia's eyes shined in fury. Run, he said to Mira and others. But, Mira started but was cut off by Natsu. I said run, Acnologia took a deep breath. Before Mira could do anything else, someone grabbed her wrist and started dragging her away from Natsu, who was now completely warped in his magic. They could see his outline growing in size as wings formed on his back's tail and horns growing. Mira started screaming, trying to get free from iron grip of the person that was holding her. She looked up red to plead anyone who hold her to let her go, but after seeing Gray next to her, who was on the verge of crying himself, she couldn't do anything anymore and just ran along. Just before Acnologia unleashed his attack, Natsu's smaller dragon's body crashed in his jaws, sending the attack toward the ocean, splitting the sea in half for few seconds before it returned to its original appearance. I see your dragon fiction is complete, Acnologia said as he spread his wings and fly up in the air. Natsu followed him close by. Without saying anything, Natsu sucked in large amount of air and fired his Chaos Dragon's roar, that was almost the same size as Acnologia. Acnologia swung his wings as hard as he could and raised even higher in the air, moving out of the way of Natsu's roar. Not bad, Gaki, Acnologia said, and then barely avoid Natsu's claw. Don't call me Gaki, Natsu roared angrily as he flew above Acnologia. Just when he was right above him, he swung down his tail, trying to hit Acnologian head. Unfortunately for him, Acnologia saw this coming and he rotated his head so Natsu's tail came down right in Acnologia's open jaws. Acnologia clenched his jaws as blood sprayed trough the sky, with Natsu's howl of pain rang trough the sky like thunder. Acnologia swung his head downwards, releasing Natsu from his jaws, and as Natsu's tail left his mouth, he unleashed another chaos roar at Natsu, who was falling in the sea, with attack hitting him directly, speeding his fall. Natsu howled once again, but he quickly flipped in the air, so instead on his back he fall on his legs. Though as soon as his feet touched the water, he swung his wings, pushing himself of the water's surface, launching himself at Acnologia, who was still looking rather amused. Natsu was up in the sky in short time as he warped his claws in magic, trying to pierce Acnologia's scales. Acnologia rolled in the air, so Natsu was only able to scratch him. He growled in frustration as he ducked under Acnologia's tail. Getting under him, he got an opening. Not wasting any second, he stretched out his neck, opened his jaws and locked them around Acnologia's neck. Metallic taste of blood filled his mouth, confirming that he did some damage at least. Acnologia hissed when smaller dragon sank his teeth in his neck. He also titled his head under him, and following example of his son, he started biting at Natsu's wings while Natsu's tail tried to get Acnologia's jaws off of Natsu's wings. His tail miserably failing, if I may add. From the island, fairy tale members watched in horror as two dragons fought in the air. Their happiness when Natsu sunk his teeth in Acnologia's neck didn't last long when two dragons started falling down into the sea. Natsu, who didn't want to risk getting chained to the earth while fighting a dragon by damaging his wings any further, pulled his teeth out preparing to unleash his roar. Acnologia smirked as he also released his grip on Natsu's wings. Two dragons collided with the water as they started sinking down. From the shore, only thing Mira and the others could see was tornadoes of chaos energy erupting from somewhere under the surface, with dark shadows dancing deadly dance under the water. Under the water, Natsu and Acnologia continued fighting, their scales glinting from the sun that break through the surface. They throw spell after spell at one another. After 10 minutes of being underwater, Acnologia started swimming toward the surface. There was silence that lasted for few seconds before Acnologia flew out of the water, and tornado of chaos energy following him close behind. Acnologia laughed as Natsu erupted from the surface. From the distance where fairy tale members were, both dragon looked like they were in the same shape, but if they got a closer look they would be able to see a difference. Acnologia had few bite marks and many scratches and gashes, but nothing was too deep except the one on his chest that went from his neck to his right foreleg. Natsu, on the other hand, didn't look so well. His wings were quite bloody from Acnologia's bites, and one of them was fractured. He had to wave quite hard with his left wing that was somewhat still usable to keep himself in the air. He had deep gash over his right eye, and there were many more other scratches and gashes covering his body. Natsu panted as he watched Acnologia circling above him like a predator that hunts its prey, with grin that was more than familiar to Natsu's enemies and friends alike, since he himself had it often when he had fun while fighting. "You are much stronger than you used to be, brat. Too bad you're still not good enough to defeat me," Acnologia said, laughing. "Is that supposed to be a compliment, you oversized lizard?" Natsu snapped. "Aren't you cranky today?" Acnologia said with chuckle. Natsu hissed as he unleashed another roar at his father before disappearing in chaotic void. Acnologia's eyes scanned his surroundings, and he was able to notice Natsu appearing over him just in time to get away with just another gash over his back instead of losing his head. Acnologia spun in the air facing Natsu, who was flying over him, as he unleashed a roar at Natsu, who didn't have enough time to avoid it since his wings were in bad shape. He was thrown at the island as he hit the ground, destroying the surrounding trees and skidding several hundred meters before stopping. "Natsu!" Wendy cried out when Natsu didn't stood back up. He landed pretty close to them, and before anyone could stop her she started running to him. Meredy tried to stop her, but Wendy was already too far away for Meredy to get a hold on her hand. Gajiel sighed as he ran after Wendy. Others followed them soon afterwards. As Acnologia flew closer, Natsu was able to stop his head from spinning. A sudden Natsu jolted him up like someone hit him with lightning. Natsu's head rose from the ground only to see everyone running toward him. "No, you morons, stop," Natsu roared at them. "No, we will fight with you," they shouted back in union. "Families stick together," Makarov cried, "and by family that includes you. You baka," Gray shouted as he ran toward Natsu. "The only thing you LL do together is that you LL die together." Natsu shouted at them as he stood up and crashed his tail right in front of them, preventing them from getting any closer. Acnologia was by now flying up in the air right above them. "You are low on magic," Altair yelled. "So?" Natsu retorted. He knew that already. There was no need to point out the obvious. "So we will give you ours. We are going home together," Makarov replied. "You said it yourself, Natsu. Nobody is going to die today," Wendy said, smiling. One by one they started joining their hands. Wendy, Mira, Altair, Meredy, Makarov, Freed, Gildarts, Kana, Lucy, Gray, Evergreen, Elfman, Bixlow, Lizana, Laxus, Gajiel, Juvia, Levi, Charla, Happy, Lily and Urza. They were all there, holding their hands. Natsu looked up and his eyes widened. Acnologia was ready. He will unleash the roar any second now. There was only one last thing he could do. Natsu warped his body around everyone, shielding them completely. The last thing they heard was Acnologia's roar and part of the ground of the cliff they stood on breaking. The last thing they saw was Natsu, Altair and Mira Jane falling in the water below before everything turned white. They didn't even have time to shout out their names. In that split of a second when the cliff broke and Mira Jane and Ultir started falling down, Natsu was able to warp himself around Mira Jane and Ultir to protect them from part of Acnologia's attack that caught him as well. After that they knew no more. The Tenrou Island was gone. That was the first thing that men from the council noticed when they approached to the place where Fairy Tail's holy ground used to be. There wasn't even trace of it left after Acnologia attacked. When Acnologia only thing they could do was to watch terrified as another dragon appeared. Acnologia was twice the size of this second dragon, and when they started fighting any normal and sane man would shiver in fear. Their roars sounded like thunders. A fight that sounded more like a sudden storm that will raise the earth. When Acnologia unleashed his final attack he said something and then flew away. Sa nua desikara anant da dadera dcb, IB, said Acnologia turned to fly away. Terusart, Minora Riko Natsu, he added before he was too far. The second thing they noticed was something big and black floating on the surface of the water. They slowly approached the floating figure, and when they saw what it was, only shock kept them from fleeing away. There, where Tenrou Island was not even an hour ago, now float that smaller black and red dragon, curled up protectively around something. From the wounds the dragon had blood was flowing, staining the ocean's water red at alarming rate. Councilmen stood on their boats, none of them daring to utter a single word. The heavy silence being broken just by loud splashes of waves and dragon's shallow breathing. Natsu, Doranbolt said as realization hit him like thunder. Lahar looked at Doranbolt confused. What did you just said? This teen, no, this dragon, he's a part of Fairy Tail. Lahar's eyes widened. A dragon is a member of Fairy Tail. Doranbolt nodded. I found that only recently and I didn't have time to report it to the council. And to be honest, I didn't believe it either. Lahar nodded absently, his eyes fixed on Natsu. We have to help him, Doranbolt said after few moments of silence, and before Lahar could say anything Doranbolt already used his magic and teleported himself on Natsu. Lahar watched from the boat as other Rune Knights, who didn't hear this conversation, started shouting at Doranbolt, "Are you crazy?" Lahar turned to them and shouted, "Start moving. We need to get that dragon to the nearest land before it sinks." What? They wanted to protest, but Lahar didn't have time nor the patience to listen to their complaints. That's an order, he yelled. In the meanwhile Doranbolt was sitting on Natsu's shoulder that was out of the water trying to wake him up. Natsu's right side was already underwater and it won't be long till he was completely under it. Hey Natsu, wake up, he tried gently. Dragon Prince didn't even stir. Natsu, no response. Doranbolt sighed as he stood up and teleported to Natsu's ear. Please don't kill me, hey Natsu. Natsu's left eye opened as he groaned in pain. His yellow eye with red iris looked toward Doranbolt, who was now on Dragon's snout. Natsu mumbled something, but it came out as another growl and his barely opened eyes started closing again. Before he lost consciousness again he could hear Doranbolt yelling his name. With the last bit of magic he had in his body he enveloped his dragon form in chaos energy. When the energy touched Doranbolt's legs, Doranbolt jumped, not even realizing that he will fall in the water. Natsu's body slowly but steadily became smaller until he returned to his human form. Doranbolt's eyes widened when he saw two women float beside Natsu. He sighed in understanding. They were the reason Natsu was curled up. He was protecting them. Doranbolt's eyes then traveled back to Natsu and his head rang in alarm when the only thing left above the surface was Natsu's arm. Doranbolt swam toward it and grabbed Natsu's arm just in time. He pulled Natsu over his shoulder with his right hand and with his left he get a hold on Mira, another woman with purple hair he didn't recognize. He teleported himself and them back to the ship and quickly but gently put Natsu on the floor. Every time he moved him he could feel some of his bones moving the way they defiantly shouldn't. He handed Mira and unknown woman to the guards since they didn't seem to be so injured and were easier to move around. They carried them under the deck and put them on some of the beds. Get some bandages. We need to stop the bleeding, Lahar ordered. A needle and thread too, Doranbolt added as he examined Natsu's wounds. These wounds aren't life-threatening if we stop the bleeding, but he won't wake up anytime soon. His magic container is completely empty. The next day Magnolia ** Macau was sitting at the bar drinking beer with Wakaba, talking about Romeo. And then he said that I'm the best father. Hey, Wakaba. Wakaba, are you even listening to me? Macau yelled. Wakaba jumped in his seat, almost letting go of his mug of beer. Sorry, Macau, I was just thinking about those that went on Tenrou. They should have come back by now or at least contact us. Macau nodded with thoughtful expression. I guess you're right. It's been almost a week since they left. As soon as he said this, doors of the guild burst open. Everyone turned their heads toward the entrance with smiles on their faces and Macau saying, "Speak of the devil." Macau stopped himself when he saw Rune Knights at the door. Hall was filled with gasps of horror when they saw who they were carrying. A sound of shattering glass filled the room when Macau let go of his mug. "And Natsu," he said, but it came out as nothing more than a whisper. Everyone watched in complete silence as Rune Knights carried Natsu in on the stretcher. Natsu was warped in bandages that were red from blood. Right behind them they carried Mira and some unknown woman in. They were relieved when they saw them with just minor injuries. They waited to see the rest of those that went on the Tenrou, but only few more knights came in. "Where is your infirmary?" Lahar asked. Droy only pointed to the doors on the second floor, still not able to speak. Rune Knights hurried upstairs with Natsu, Mira and purple-haired woman. "What is the meaning of this?" Macau asked, his voice finally back as anger and worry started building up in his chest. "You better sit down, and I would recommend to get someone to treat the wounds of your fellow members," Doranbolt stated. Macau nodded to Jet, who ran out of the doors to get Perliuzica. "Start talking," Macau hissed as he sat down. 1 hour later when Rune Knights left, the hall was left in silence. Many members were already crying. Macau was trying to stay calm, but it was hard as some tears escaped his eyes. They were gone. All of them. Master, Gray, Lucy, Lizana, Thunder God Tribe, Levi, Exceeds, Urza, Wendy, even Laxus, everyone. "Nina," he sobbed. It was a sad day for Fairy Tail. Sad one indeed. 5 days later, Natsu's Pav *, I was awakened by silent whispers. At first it sounded like they were far away and I couldn't hear what were they talking about, but as I concentrated more on the voices I could hear them better. It seemed like I got closer to them, or maybe it was them that got closer to me. I couldn't tell. He woke up. A male voice said. Or whispered. I wasn't sure. It's been 5 days since then and he's still asleep, another voice said louder. Who are they talking about? Where am I? After everything that happened, you can't quite accept that he will wake up whenever we want. This time it was female voice. What happened? I don't remember. That's strange. I usually don't forget things like this. It seems important. My head is killing me. Mira and that girl Altair woke up 3 days ago, the first voice said again. Mira and Altair. My eyes shot open as memories and images returned in my head. Everything around me was blurry, but I could hear a loud gasp somewhere close to me. He's awake. I could finally recognize that the woman was Biska. Oi Natsu, how are you feeling? The first male voice was Macau. I slowly pushed myself in sitting position, holding back a groan as my headache skyrocketed. I'll go get Mira and Altair. Second man seemed to be Alzak, though I wasn't quite sure since he left the room before I got a good look at him. Fine, I answered Masau's question in hoarse voice. I could see on their faces that they didn't believe me. It was a lie after all. Every inch of my body was killing me. Do you need something? Hungry? Water? Biska asked. I looked at her and said, water. She nodded and went after Alzak to get me some water. I turned toward last person in the room and asked, even though I knew the answer, what happened with the others? Macau gulped and looked at the floor, finding it incredibly interesting all of a sudden. They are gone, he said quietly, though I was able to hear him because of my enhanced hearing. He didn't need to explain what he meant by gone. It was more than clear to me. Biska walked in with glass and jug filled with water. I didn't even say anything as she put it next to my bed on nightstand. Alzak walked behind Biska and said, I couldn't find the girls. They've already gone home. Macau nodded and then looked at me. I didn't really pay any attention to what was happening around me. The world around me started spinning as I was repeatedly saying in my mind that one dreadful sentence, they are dead. Evergreen, Levi, Lizana, Elfman, Freed, Laxus, Lucy, Happy, Charla, Urza, Gray, Kana. All of them, even those I considered my family. My grandfather Makarov, my first friend, and my sister Wendy, and a person that was like a brother to me even though I would never admit that, Gildarts. They died because I didn't protect them. They died because I was too weak. It's all my fault. This was first time in many years that I felt so weak. My chest felt heavy. It was getting hard to breathe. Leave this room, I said, not looking at their worried expressions. But Natsu, Macau started, but I was starting to lose my patience. Get out, I said little louder, clenching with my left hand the white sheet that was covering my legs. I couldn't move my right arm or leg as they were broken and warped with bandages. Well, bigger part of my body was warped in them. Natsu, we can't. Alzak tried to speak, but a jug filled with water flew few millimeters from his head and crashed loudly in the wall behind him, shattering in million pieces. Get out, now, I growled as my magic energy started sparking around me. Macau wanted to say something, but Alzak and Biska dragged him out. If you need anything, just, Biska was wanted to say before she closed the door, but the glass that crashed near her silencing her. Now, when I heard them close the door, I buried my face in my left hand as few tears escaped my eyes. I closed my eyes and titled my head back, letting ear-splitting howl that was heard by whole Magnolia. It's all my fault. Time skip 7 years later, normal POV *AN. I'll explain what happened in those 7 years later. 2 boys stood on the edge of the pier, looking towards the sea. A girl sat next to them with her feet touching water surface. It was beautiful summer day with seagulls croaking around. Do you think they will find something? The girl asked. She had green eyes and brown hair that was tied up in 2 buns on both sides of her head with red ribbons. She was wearing a gray t-shirt and a black skirt with red details. She was around 14 years old. I really hope they will, the older boy answered. He had spiky blonde hair and green eyes. He wore a matching gray t-shirt and black pants. The boy was 16 years old. The other boy nodded, too lost in his thoughts to say anything. This boy wore green pants, a purple coat that was unzipped and an orange muffler around his neck. Please find them, somewhere at sea. A ship sailed through the sea, the sun bright overhead. On the ship's deck stood Biska, Alzak, their daughter Oska, Max, Warren, Jet, and Droy. How long until we get there? Oska asked. Oska is a young little girl with dark green hair that's tied in a braid. She has orange cowboy hat on her head and pink shirt paired with brown skirt. We're almost there, sweetheart, Biska said with smile. Hey guys, there's something in front of us, Max yelled. The others looked at him and then to where Max was pointing out at sea. After few seconds of squinting and blinking due to the blinding sun above them, they all could see something in front of them simply floating on the water surface. It's not something, it's someone, a girl, Biska yelled. You're right, Warren yelled. A girl was right in front of them, standing on the water surface. She smiled at them, and as she smiled, enormous waves raised from the water behind her and an island emerged from the water. A golden sphere was warped around the island with fairy tale symbol on it. All of the fairy tale members were left speechless. Tenrou, it's Tenrou Island. Max spoke first, his eyes wide in shock. We'll see Levy again, Jet and Droy yelled in union, hugging each other, tears running from their eyes. Stop acting like the idiots we all know you are and start moving this ship. A cold voice spoke behind them. Droy and Jet jumped in surprise at the harsh tone and turned to face the person that was flying beside the ship on his huge bat-like wings. The person behind them was a tall, well-built young man who didn't look older than 19 years old even though he was 25. He had long, pink, straight hair that was spiky at the bottom. It went down to his lower back and was tied up in ponytail. Think about Candace, from D. Gray Man, hairstyle just little spikier. He wore a black long coat that went down to his ankles. The coat didn't have right sleeves, so the fairy tale symbol on his shoulder was visible. His coat was unzipped so you could see his black sleeveless shirt that had red lines over it. He had gray baggy pants that were tucked into black combat boots. Around his neck was necklace with dragon scales on it. Over the necklace was black scaly scarf. The most distinctive feature on him, if you ignore his wings, 2 meters long tail, and black horns, were his eyes. They were yellow with red irises and snake-like pupils. Hey Natsu, what's up? They said, smiling nervously as they trailed off, practically sweating bullets in the process. Go back to work and don't lose that girl from your sight. He hissed back. Aye sir. They all shouted in unison and ran to get the boat moving. Natsu then flew to the front deck and sat on the fence, his legs hanging down toward the water. His eyes not moving, not once, from the girl that still stood on the water surface like she was waiting for them. Hey Natsu, do you know who she is? Alzak asked, walking up to Natsu. No, he deadpanned. Quote. Alzak looked at Natsu, his lips squeezed in a thin line. Natsu rolled his eyes. What? He asked in an annoyed voice. Are they? Still, you know, alive, he asked quietly. Natsu sighed and jumped from the fence to the deck. I don't know. The wind is blowing towards the north so I can't smell their scent and we are too far away for me to hear them. Alzak looked toward the island. His eyes widened suddenly. The girl. She's walking away. We'll lose her in the forest. Natsu's eyes snapped back to the girl. Crap. He growled and jumped over the fence. Wah. Alzak was about to ask something but just before Natsu hit the water he used Chaotic Void, and teleported himself to the shore, and before he even touched the ground he flew after the girl, trying to catch her. Hurry, we need to catch them. Alzak yelled to the other members on the ship. Aye sir. Other responded in union, with Natsu asterisk. Damn it. Wait up you little brat, he thought as he flew through the forest toward a small, glowing dot in the distance that was the mysterious blonde-haired girl. With the speed he was currently going, it didn't take him too long to catch up with her. She sat on a rock and waited for Natsu to come. When Natsu got there he started to say something but what was beside the blonde-haired girl stopped him. He froze in spot, looking at the small 13-years-old girl he considered his sister 7 years ago. She looked completely the same, not a day older. Wendy, Natsu whispered, too shocked to say anything else. He fell on his knees down beside her as his wings, tail and horns retreated back into his body. His ears twitched when he heard more footsteps behind him, indicating that the other members were already behind him. Hey, Natsu, what's going on? He heard Warren yell but he didn't care. His lips were squeezed in a thin line before they stretched into a smile. A smile that no one had seen on his face for 7 years, excluding his two mates. Imagine the other members' thoughts when they saw Natsu smiling. Am I seeing things? Max whispered to Droy. Droy shook his head. No, unable to say anything. It didn't take them long to realize why Natsu was smiling though. Wendy. Jet gasped in shock, being the first to notice her. Wendy. Alzak repeated and then laughed happily. Wendy. They all yelled in unison. Natsu shook her shoulders gently, trying to wake her up. After few seconds she stirred. Her brown eyes opened slowly but quickly shut them because the light was too bright. She then slowly opened them again, finding herself face to face with a strange-looking Natsu. Natsu, she asked, confused and wanting to confirm that it was indeed Natsu in front of her. Natsu nodded, still smiling. Her eyes suddenly widened when she remembered what happened. Wait, we were attacked by Acnologia, and we were about to give our magic to you, and you, Mira and Altair fell off the cliff when it broke, and, she then saw everyone around her, and what are you guys doing here? And why do you look older? Others laughed and Natsu just kept smiling. We'll explain that later. He looked toward the girl that led him here. Who are you and where are the others? The mystery girl smiled. My name is not important right now. Your friends are waiting for you to wake them up, she said and pointed to the clearing that was near them. Everyone ran toward where she pointed while Natsu helped Wendy to stand up as they walked to where others are. Hey, Urza's there. Gajiel, wake up. Levi, I found Gray. Droy got fat. Master Makarov, hey, have anyone seen Lucy? She's over there. Who's this pink-haired chick? It took around 10 minutes for everyone to be found and then half an hour to explain roughly what happened. We were saved by our first master, Makarov said with comical tears running down his cheeks. The blonde girl, in reality Mavis Vermilion, smiled. It was your bonds that saved you. I just finished the spell, Mavis said. They talked about many things that happened and then Lizana remembered something. Lizana looked over at Natsu. Is Mira okay? Natsu looked at her and smirked. Yay. She's fine. And Altair? Merity asked. Jet smiled, looking at Natsu. Oh, they are both more than fine. Tenrou group looked at him confused. What are you talking about? Levi asked. Well, you see our He was interrupted by Natsu's fist as it connected with the top of his head, knocking him unconscious. Shut up, he hissed, demonic aura spreading around him. The others gulped. Anyway, Droy said, taking a step back from Natsu, we should get back to the ship. I'm sure others are wondering where we've been for so long. Right, let's go home. Few minutes later on the ship asterisk, so you guys married? Lucy asked Biska and Alzak, who stood next to each other. Yes, Biska said smiling. And this is your daughter? Wendy asked, looking at Asuka that was running around the ship laughing while trying to catch Happy who was flying around in front of her. Her name's Asuka, Alzak said, a smile on his face. I can't believe we missed all that, Urza yelled, crying. She turned serious all of a sudden and looked Biska directly in the eyes. Others quieted down waiting to hear what she has to say. Which cake did you have? Others' sweat dropped at Urza's question. Was it? She gulped. Strawberry cheesecake? She asked, her eyes shining with tears. Alzak and Biska looked away smiling nervously. Oh, it was, Urza exclaimed, throwing her hands in the air. You have to tell us every detail. I want to know exactly what was the taste of that cake. With that she dragged Biska with her to another part of the ship and other girls followed her. Same old Urza, Jet said chuckling. They didn't change at all, Droy agreed nodding. They were frozen for 7 years. You can't expect them to change just because we have, Max added. It's good to have them back, Natsu spoke from behind them, startling them. Makarov walked over to Natsu who was, once again, flying beside the ship and cleared his throat trying to get Natsu's attention that was currently locked on Wendy. Natsu glanced at Makarov before his eyes moved to look right in front of himself showing that he was listening. Still having trouble with motion sickness? He asked, trying to start a conversation. Natsu looked at him with blank expression. Is that a problem? Makarov laughed. No, not at all. A few seconds passed in silence. So, I was wondering. Makarov started and Natsu looked at him. Why do you still look so young? Makarov asked, looking at Natsu. Natsu smirked again. Dragons live for hundreds of years. How would I look with 500 if I aged as you humans do? Makarov laughed. True. Thank you. Makarov said after a while. Natsu looked at him with expressionless face that hid his confusion. For what? He asked. For keeping the guild together, Makarov answered. Natsu chuckled. You shouldn't be thanking me, you should thank the new master once we come home, Natsu said smirking. New master? Makarov asked, surprised. He hadn't even thought about Fairy Tail having a new master. It will take more time for everything to return to normal and for him to get used to everything that happened in what seemed to him only few days. Who is it? He asked after getting over his shock. That would spoil the surprise, Natsu said smirking. I think this is the first time I heard you calling Fairy Tail your home, Makarov said after short pause. It's not the first time, Natsu replied. Whatever you say, Makarov shrugged. He then looked at Natsu who was still smiling. You're in a good mood today, Makarov noted. You can't blame me, Natsu replied. No one is blaming you for anything, Makarov laughed. I'm happy to see you smiling, that's all. A friend of mine once told me to smile more often, Natsu chuckled. Makarov raised eyebrow wondering who was that friend. Land ahead, they heard someone yelling. It's been a while since you guys were here, Natsu said. In outskirts of Magnolia in outskirts of Magnolia, a city that was once home to the strongest guild in Fury, now stood small wooden windmill. It wasn't some worn-out windmill. It was nice maintained windmill that was now home to one of the smallest guilds in Fury, Fairy Tail. But don't think that Fairy Tail is weak just because it became small guild. They are still a well-respected guild. They are 4th guild in the country to be more precise, even though some people are saying that they deserve their old place as number 1. Inside of this small windmill that had the Fairy Tail symbol on it were 10 people sitting, drinking, and talking. At the bar stood a young woman with purple hair known as Kanana. She was talking with Mira Jane who was sitting in front of her. Mira Jane is now a beautiful young woman. She has long white hair and blue eyes. She wore black kimono with red dragon on the back and red ribbon tied around her waist. Next to her sat Altair, member of Fairy Tail for the past 7 years and Natsu's mate for the last 5. Her long purple hair was tied in loose bride. She also wore black kimono, but she had purple dragon on her back with white ribbon tied around her waist similar to Mira Jane's. If anyone who didn't know them saw them for the first time, he or she would, without a doubt, say that they weren't older than 20. That was because of a spell Altair used on herself and Mira Jane. She was able to use that spell on only 2 people and it was really dangerous spell. But it was worth it. A spell that slowed their time. She used this so that she and Mira Jane could stay a little longer with Natsu. Altair was currently looking toward guild's doors like she was waiting for someone. Mira Jane noticed this and said, "Don't worry. I'm sure they'll find them this time." Altair smiled, moving her attention to Mira. "I know, but I can't help myself. What if they come back again empty-handed? I don't want Natsu to blame himself any longer for what happened." Mira put hand on her shoulder. "I know how you feel. How wouldn't I? I know him since we were kids and I love him as much as you do. But, Just try not to think about it, K. I guess. Anyway, I was thinking, Mira started but was interrupted when someone opened guild's doors. Everyone turned their eyes to see who came in the guild. Their eyes widened in disbelief when they saw familiar faces they haven't seen for 7 years. So tiny. Makarov spoke after seeing the guild hall. We're back, Gray said. I need something to drink, Kana said grinning. It's been a while, Lucy smiled. Yo, was Gajil's simple greeting. Hi everyone, Lizana said. Mira put her hands over her mouth, tears escaping her blue eyes. Altair jumped from her seat and looked over Tenrou group. When she spotted familiar pink hair she started crying and ran toward this pink-haired person at full speed. She practically jumped at her and almost shocked her while hugging her saying, Merity. You're alive, I'm so happy. Mira soon followed Altair's example as she ran to her siblings. Everyone started laughing, crying, talking, and drinking. It didn't take long before this reunion became a party. Makarov sat on the bar like he used to do. Macau sat beside him. Makarov eyed Macau and then finally asked, Are you the new guild master? He asked Macau, who laughed in response. Of course not. Macau continued laughed. Had it been that way Fairy Tail would already be disbanded. Wakaba laughed sitting next to Macau after dodging his fist. I wouldn't be that bad. Macau yelled. Makarov laughed and then looked around the guild. Then who is it? Who do you think it is? It's Mira, of course. Wakaba laughed when Makarov spit his bear at Macau. Mira Jane is new guild master. Makarov shouted surprised. Elfman, who heard this, yelled in shock while pointing his finger at Mira, your new guild master. What? Gray cried out. Tenrou group looked at Mira, who just smiled sweetly. How did that happen? Lizana asked, smiling happily. Well, you see, flashback 2 months after Acnologia's attack *. You know that we have to decide who will be the 4th guild master, Macau said to the rest of the guild that was gathered around him. He was standing on the stage so everyone could see him. Everyone nodded, knowing this will have to be decided sooner or later. So since Master Makarov didn't selected the new guild master before he died, we need to select our master ourselves, he continued. New guild master needs to be strong, and I don't mean just physically, but mentally as well. He or she has to know everyone in the guild. He or she has to be someone we can rely on and someone we can trust, but he also has to be someone who can rely on us and someone who trusts us, members started whispering among themselves. She has to be someone who needs us as much as we need him, her, Macau said. How about Natsu? Someone asked. Natsu, who was sitting on the fence of the 2nd floor drinking his drink, almost choked himself with it after hearing this. The one that said this was quickly answered by other members. How does he match the description? Are you crazy? Hell no. Natsu let out a sigh of relief. Being a guild master was something what he definitely didn't want to be. Okay, please silence down everyone, Macau yelled. Any other ideas? Natsu decided to say something. What do you think about Mira Jane? Some of the members looked at him in shock. Some of them completely forgot Natsu was there. Mira Jane looked at him surprised. She knew he was there, but she didn't expect anyone, especially him, to say that. Members thought about what Natsu said, and soon the whispers turned in loud shouts of approval. Macau called her to come to him on the stage. Look, Mira, I know this is really hard decision, so you can, I'll do it, she said firmly, cutting him off. Macau looked at her surprised. He wasn't expecting her to agree so quickly. You sure? He asked. Yes, she answered with even more determination shining in her eyes. I will do everything I can to maintain this guild strong. Okay then. Macau sighed and turned to the crowd in front of him. Our 4th guild master, Mira Jane Strauss. The guild was filled with cheers. End of flashback *. So you actually became guild master thanks to Natsu? Gray asked, his eyes traveling trough the crowd looking for pink-haired dragon prince, but he was nowhere to be found. Yep, Mira said happily. They talked about that for next few minutes, but then Wendy noticed few unfamiliar faces. We have new members, she asked. Mira looked at her confused for the first few seconds, but she quickly realized who was she talking about. Oh, you guys haven't met yet, she said, and then called, Hey Arthur. Annie, come and introduce yourself. The Tenrou group turned to 2 kids who were talking with Romeo. They quickly ran next to Mira Jane. Annie, the girl with green eyes and brown hair that sat on pier this morning, introduced herself first. Hello, my name is Andrina Smith, but everyone calls me Annie. I'm 14 years old and I use illusion magic. Arthur, the boy with green eyes and blonde hair who was with the girl and Romeo on pier, talked next. Hi, my name's Arthur Smith, Annie's older brother. I'm 16 years old and I use shadow make magic. Illusion and shadow make magic. I heard about them before, but you two are the first people I have ever met that used that magic, Urza said, surprised. Arthur and Annie are 2 out of 3 that joined the guild after you guys left, Mira said, smiling. Only 3 people joined the guild? Lucy asked, surprised. Well, we aren't considered the strongest guild, so not many mages wants to join anymore, Mira replied. It's hard to stay number 1 with barely 5 members strong enough to fight, Natsu said, appearing beside Mira. Where have you been? Gray asked, looking Natsu in the eyes. That is something for me to know and for you to find out, Natsu hissed. Anyway, Urza started, I was thinking, how are we gonna become number 1 again? That's what I wanted to talk to you actually, Natsu said, turning to Mira. She raised her eyebrow quizzically. I'm listening, Natsu smirked. There is only one way for us to become number 1 in short time. Tenrou group looked at him confused, but other members looked at him with surprise. You're not talking about Grand Magic Games, or GMG for short. He finished with smirk. Grand Magic Games, Levy asked, confused. What's that? I never heard about it. It's no wonder you never heard about it. They started it after you guys disappeared after all, Lackey answered. Basically, all guilds in Fury come in one place and play different games and fight each other to determine the strongest. Romeo explained. How come you guys didn't beat them every time then? I mean, Natsu, Altair and Mira are really strong and I'm sure other members aren't that bad, Lucy asked, confused. They aren't bad, they are horrible, Natsu stated coldly, not paying attention to angry shouts behind him. Mira chuckled. Don't be mean, Natsu. You know that's not true. Mira couldn't compete since she is guild master, Altair couldn't do it on her own, and Natsu was busy with other things. Wakaba said. What other things? Makarov looked at Natsu, who answered with a cold, later, old man, and we did only compete 3 years and the games are here for 7, Altair said. Well then, what rank are we anyway? Lucy asked curiously. We are currently 4th guild in Fury, Mira said. Well, it could have been worse, Panther Lily said. So are we gonna compete this year? Natsu finally asked. Do you even need to ask? Gajil replied with smirk. We are gonna be number 1 again. Makarov yelled with his fist pumped in the air. Yay! Other followed his example, raising their hands. When are this games anyway? Evergreen asked after few seconds. We have 3 months to prepare, Max said. Great, 3 months are more than enough, Gray said with grin. We will split in few training groups and start the first thing tomorrow morning, Altair said with smirk. They talked about the groups, GMG, and everything regarding them for more than 2 hours. After a while, Urza remembered what Mira said before. Hey Mira, you mentioned 3 people joining the guild. Who is the third? Urza asked with thoughtful expression. Well, I'm quite sure you know him quite well, Mira said, suddenly looking uncomfortable. Urza, a voice spoke behind Urza. Urza's eyes widened when she heard the familiar voice. It can't be, she said and turned her head slowly. Jalal, she said, seeing voices on her face. Hi, long time no see. He smiled nervously, lifting his hand and waved awkwardly. Tenrou group was left speechless. They looked like they saw a ghost. Well, you can't blame them. Jalal was considered dead until 5 years ago after all. Tenrou group still thought he was dead. Am I seeing things? Urza asked no one in particular. No, Natsu deadpanned. Urza blinked, looking at Natsu and then back at Jalal. She reached with her arm and touched Jalal's face like she didn't believe he was there. Jalal smiled softly at her and said, It's really me, Urza. Urza's eyes filled with tears. But how? I thought you were dead. You weren't the only one, Jalal said, chuckling. Natsu glared at him for some reason. Natsu's glare didn't go unnoticed by Makarov. The old master turned to look at Mira. Jane, cared to explain. Mira giggled. Let's just say that he wasn't happy to see Jalal all those years ago. How are you still alive? Gray asked, stepping next to Urza. It happened 5 years ago. Altair spoke and all attention turned towards her. The council sent a request for Natsu, Mira, and me to go on a mission to stop a dark guild called Oracion Cease. We were asked to meet somewhere with 3 other guilds and make a temporary alliance with them in order to destroy Oracion Cease. She continued. So when we got there the Blue Pegasus was already there. Trimins, Hibiki Lates, Eve Tirm, Ren Akatsuki and their leader Ichiya Vandalay Kotobuki. Urza shivered at the last name. Let's just say they had hard time staying alive after trying to flirt with us. Mira giggled looking at Natsu who had his teeth clenched and half smiled to hide his anger while muttering something about how they should have let him kill them. Urza agreed with him silently though she didn't say anything. Next came Lamia Scale and their three members Leon Vascha, gray eyes widened at the name, Jura Nikas and Sherry Blendy. The last guild that came was some new guild called Sabretooth. Mira was the one who said this. They sent 3 brats and 2 cats to help us. Natsu muttered. They were strong mages for their age. You can't deny that, Mira pointed out. They were brats. Natsu deadpanned. I thought they were cute. Mira said stubbornly. They weren't, Natsu said in monotone voice again. I agree with Natsu, Altair said. Mira glared at her. Say what? I said I agree with Natsu, they are brats. Altair replied with smirk. Mira wanted to say something but was interrupted by Urza. Can you get back to story? Mira cleared her throat and started speaking. Anyway, the 3 cuties, Natsu and Altair huffed at that, were Minerva Orland, Sting Eucliffe and Rogue Cheney. Then we were informed that Oracion Cease are actually after Nirvana, a magical item which has the power to turn light to darkness and vice versa. In other words, if this magic was acquired, they could turn members of good guilds against each other and bring forth total chaos. A few gasps escaped Tenrou group. So we split in 2 groups. Natsu, Brat Sting and Leon went into the forest to find their base while others tried to find Nirvana. Altair continued. While Natsu and those 2 were away we were attacked by Oracion Cease. We ended up in a fight, naturally. Jura, Mira and me were holding our ground but others were having problems. They used Minerva to distract Myra's attention while one of the members, Cobra, sent his pet snake, Kubelios, to bite Mira, which it did. She was poisoned and while my attention was on her their leader recognized me and took me by surprise, knocking me unconscious. Altair said. They took me into their base. Altair said, and not long after she was taken Natsu showed up since he sensed something was wrong. He saw me poisoned and used, Dragon Slayer Forbidden Art, Life Drainer, Death Door, to heal me. Mira said and then added, after we explained what happened he tracked them down using his nose. When I arrived to their base they showed me Jalal's body in some sort of the coffin. They said that he was neither alive nor dead and that my magic can save him. Altair spoke. Since it was my fault for what happened in Tower of Heaven in the first place, Altair started. How do you mean your fault? Urza interrupted her. Altair looked at her little shocked. She forgot that Urza doesn't know about this. I was ordered by Master Hades to use possession magic on him. Altair said quietly. Urza's eyes widened as she looked at Altair and then at Jalal. So it wasn't your fault. It was never your fault. She stuttered, looking at Jalal who didn't dare to look in her eyes. Her expression suddenly changed from shocked to furious as she turned to look at Altair. It was you, she yelled, sword appearing in her hand as she pointed it at Altair's throat. It was all your fault. She screamed pressing the sword little harder drawing blood. Altair started at her in shock, her eyes filling with tears. I don't care for your excuses you buy. She was cut off by sudden kick in her stomach that sent her flying. Natsu stood protectively in front of a shocked Altair. Just dare to finish that sentence and I will kill you. It wasn't a threat, it was a promise. Urza looked at him shocked and quickly realized what she wanted to say. She stood up and muttered an apology, still obviously angry at Altair. Altair put her hand on Natsu's shoulder and shook her head. It's okay Natsu. I deserved it. She then turned to Urza and much to her surprise she bowed her head to Urza and said, I am deeply sorry for what I did. I can't expect you to forgive me and to call me your friend. I just want you to know that I deeply regret my actions from that time. Others looked at Altair in shock except Natsu who just glared at Urza. It wasn't your fault. You were forced to do that mother, Arthur said quietly but Tenrou group heard her. Their jaws hit the floor. Mother. They yelled in union. Natsu, Wendy and Gajil covered their ears. Well he and Annie started calling Mira and me, mother, short after he and his sister joined the guild. Altair explained with smile. They come from poor family and their parents died at young age so they spent most of the time with us. Natsu seemed to know them from before and he was actually the one that invited them to join the guild around 5 years ago. Shortly after Oracion Cease mission. Mira said smiling. He even taught us our magic. Annie chirped happily. Now it was their turn to stare at Natsu. Wait, if Mira and Altair are mother, does that mean? Gray started. Natsu just looked away, fighting against blush. Yup, he's father, Arthur said, obviously amused at Natsu's expression. Ah, that's so cute. Wendy said happily. How did you taught them that magic anyway? They both are quite rare and I would dare to say forgotten magics. Makarov said. You think that I know just Dragon Slayer magic? Natsu answered with another question. You would be surprised to see how much he changed during these 7 years. Jalal stepped into the conversation. Oh, that reminds me, you didn't finish your story. Kana said. Where was I? Altair said. Oh right, well I decided to revive him after thinking about it. When I did that I realized he lost his memories and that the only thing he remembered was actually your name. She turned to Urza, who looked surprised at Jalal. Then Jalal left and Oracion Cease followed him. Shortly after that Natsu arrived and we went to find Jalal and others. Let's just say Natsu wasn't really happy when I told him what I've done. Jalal and Oracion Cease were, however, able to find Nirvana before Natsu and I got there and they unlocked it. Then all members of allied forces, the name of 4 guilds while we worked together, fought against them. This time we were better prepared and we actually were able to beat them. Natsu was the one that fought their leader Brain, who later turned out to have 2 personalities, and the second one called himself Zero. Mira was against Cobra. Those 2 brats Sting and Rogue fought against Angel. Leon and Sherry defeated Racer. Jura and Minerva beat Hotai. The Trimmins were assisting around and trying to slow down Nirvana while figuring out how to stop it, and Jalal and I defeated Midnight. Altair finished. When we defeated them, Natsu got face to face with Jalal. After me and Altair convinced him not to kill him again. Altair explained that he helped her defeat Midnight and Natsu asked me to let Jalal join the guild. The Magical Council then arrived and took the remaining Oracion Cease, since Brain, Zero was mysteriously found dead, in prison, and they wanted Jalal as well. But since he helped us and he saved Altair from Midnight's attack that would have killed her, Natsu decided to help him and he scared the councilman off. Mira said. I joined the guild when we arrived in Magnolia and soon after it my memories came back. Jalal said. The conversation dragged out late into the night. It was almost dawn when most of the members had fallen asleep somewhere in the guild. They slept on the desk, chairs and even on the floor. Natsu, who was unable to fall asleep due to his nightmares that still haunted him even after all these years, stayed silent, while sitting on a bench with Altair resting her head on his shoulder and Mira Jane on his lap. He was gently stroking her hair. Arthur, Annie and Wendy fell asleep on the floor beside them, leaning on the bench. He smiled at the scene as the first rays of sun started entering the hall trough large windows of this small windmill he called home. You are finally home, he whispered softly, his right hand still stroking Myra's hair. As more light came inside he realized it could wake up the others. He held out his left hand and gathered a black orb in it. The orb had small with lights in it and it seemed like whole night sky was held in that small orb, with even some of the lights falling inside the orb looking like shooting stars. Illusion make. Night of fallen stars. He whispered and the orb extended itself covering the whole guild. The light of the dawn disappeared along with the walls of the hall. Now it looked like endless meadow with the most beautiful sky that you can imagine. Good night, Mina, Natsu said. He moved carefully, not wanting to wake up his mates in more comfortable position, and closed his eyes waiting for someone to wake up. It didn't take long for him to fall into a light sleep himself. Time skip *. Natsu was awakened quite rudely, if I may say, by sudden yell. Holy shit, what the heck is this? It was Gray who yelled this. The few members that were also awoken by Gray were also quite surprised by whatever they saw. Natsu opened one eye to see what was going on. He chuckled when he realized the source of this commotion was his spell. It's father's illusion make magic, Arthur said while yawning. You can use illusion make magic for stuff like this? Jet asked Natsu, surprised. Since when can you use illusion make magic to being with? Lucy said, a little too loud. I learned that magic 6 years ago, Natsu said in monotone voice. Mira and Altair were awake by now and Natsu stood up. He stretched himself and said, perish. The night sky retreated itself in the orb in his hand before it disappeared. It left members blinking due to the sudden sun that showed that noon had long since passed. Well, now that you all are awake, I guess we can start packing and get ready to go on our training trip, Natsu said as he started walking outside the guild, probably to get his stuff ready. Oh right, I forgot about that, Levi exclaimed and ran outside dragging Gajeel behind her. Well, I guess we should go as well, Gray said, and he and Urza exited the hall. Soon whole Tenrou group was gone plus Natsu, Annie, Arthur and Ultir. Makarov stayed in the guild and looked at Mira, who also stayed behind. You're not going with them to pack yourself? Makarov asked. I will. I just wanted to talk to you first, she answered seriously, getting Makarov's attention. Makarov raised an eyebrow and listened as Mira continued, would you like to be our guild master again? Makarov, surprised by sudden question, asked, why? I mean, I'm sure other members like you as their master, how about guildarts? Makarov asked after a short pause. As much as he loved this guild, being a master to this destroyers, and paying the bills was something he definitely didn't wanted. I've already asked him, Mira said. I knew you wouldn't be too thrilled about it, so I asked guildarts first, but today he just left me a letter saying he has more important things to do and named you a master. Mira smiled sweetly, but demonic aura around her told him she wasn't too happy about what guildarts did. Well, I guess I will be Fairy Tail's 6th master, Makarov said with sigh, trying not to cry while thinking about bills. Thank you very much, master, Mira said as she bowed her head slightly and then added, I'll go now to pack my things. And with that she was gone. Makarov sulked. Kanana, would you be so kind and bring me some beer? Kanana smiled and nodded. One beer coming right up. Give me entire barrel, Makarov called after her. Other members laughed. Time skip *. Mira stood on beautiful white sand. Whole Tenrou group decided to come to the beach to train, and Natsu, Ultir, Mira, Jalal, Annie and Arthur decided to tag along. It's so beautiful, Lucy said looking at the beach. See, here we come, Gray and Arthur shouted, running toward the sea full speed. We did come here to train, guys. Jalal sighed while Natsu face-palmed. Just let them be for now, he said as he sat his towel down. He stretched his arms, fighting back a yawn. Jalal seemed to notice this. Didn't get enough sleep, he asked Natsu, who looked at him and shrugged. I don't remember the last time I did, he said in a motionless voice. Jalal's sweat dropped. Mira, Ultir, Urza and other girls were playing with a big beach ball in the water while boys kept their silly competitions. It seemed Gray and Arthur developed some kind of rivalry. Natsu smirked and took off his shirt, showing his well-defined muscles and numerous scars that littered it. He unwrapped his scarf around his neck and tied it around his hips. He stood in fighting position and turned to Jalal, who looked at him little surprised. Care for a spare? Natsu asked, still smirking. Jalal smiled. No magic, Jalal added. That would be too easy for me anyway, Natsu teased. It was something new to Tenrou group to see Natsu like this, but 7 years passed since they last saw him, even though it seems to them like it was barely a week. He changed. He was smiling more often around people he considered his friends, though still not enough in their opinion. He wasn't so cold anymore. Mira and Ultir had big parts in this. Don't get so confident, Jalal said. Jalal was strong mage, there was no doubt about that, but he knew that he didn't stand a chance against Natsu, especially if he used his magic. Soon the dragon and the human started their little spar, but Jalal knew Natsu was holding back. It was obvious, even though he was going all out. So when are we gonna start out training camp? Ultir asked Mira as the two girls watched their mate happily. After lunch. At least that's what Natsu said, Mira replied. She then turned to Ultir. Swimming contest. Ultir didn't reply as she jumped in the water and started swimming. Mira yelled after her as she jumped, hey, that's not fair. Like I care, Ultir laughed. Just wait for me to catch you, Mira shouted. Urza looked at them confused. They have this kind of rivalry, Arthur said, appearing behind her out of nowhere. Urza jumped slightly in surprise. Urza's sweat dropped, remembering all the times Natsu done that. Natsu's pupil, no doubt. There was silent thud and Urza turned around to see Jalal lying on the sand and Natsu standing above him dusting his hands. That was quick, she noted. Arthur smiled. Nah, father seems to be in good mood. It usually lasts much shorter. Urza looked at him surprised and then back at Natsu, who held out his hand out and helped Jalal stand out. They seem pretty close friends, Lucy said, joining the conversation. They are, Annie said happily as she walked to them with Wendy beside her. When Jalal stood up they talked about something, but Urza and others couldn't hear about what, and then they walked toward them. Lunch will be at noon, Jalal informed them. After that we will start our training camp, Natsu continued and then looked at Tenrou group. And we will train you. He was talking about himself, Altair, Mira and Jalal. Tenrou group gulped at smiles the four gave them as demonic aura surrounded them. And believe me, I'm one hell of a trainer. Natsu said with wicked smile. Tenrou group shivered, their faces pale. After they ate their many-believed last meal they gathered on the beach once again. Most of the Tenrou group just sat down on the sand while few of them remained on their feet. Altair, Mira, Jalal and Natsu stood in front of them. The sun was high in the sky as it showed that it was barely 3 o'clock. There wasn't even a cloud on the sky and it was almost unbearably hot. The wind that came from the sea was pretty much like God's gift. Okay, Mira said with smile, it's time to start training. We don't have much time so we will start as soon as we're done with this conversation. The 4 of us will train you by splitting you in 4 groups, Altair interrupted her earning a glare from Mira. She smiled sweetly to her in response. She devil huffed. As Altair said, Mira started, we will split you in 4 groups. And the first group will be, alright guys, I'll train with you for the next 3 months so prepare yourselves, Mira said happily to the little group behind her as she stopped walking. Lizana, Elfman, Kana and Bixlo looked at Mira. They were standing on a cliff with sea splashing at the bottom of it. There wasn't anyone around them so it was a good place to start. It's good thing we didn't end up with Natsu. Bixlo whispered to Kana who couldn't help but agree. 4 dragon slayers. Once I'm done with you, you will wish you were with Natsu, Mira said smiling sweetly. Bixlo and Kana paled. She heard us, so when do we begin? Lizana asked curiously. Glad you asked, Mira said smirking. First I need to see how good are you, Mira said after a short pause and then added before anyone could ask, you will fight me, Kana looked at her, one-on-one. Nope, all at once, Mira said smiling sweetly. She's a real man, Elfman shouted, she's a girl. Bixlo muttered and then said turning to face Mira, look Mira. ... We know you're stronger than before but you can't be strong enough to beat us all at once, if you believe that be ready for a surprise, Mira said as golden light warped around her. Satan's soul. Gorgona, Mira Jane's hair slowly warped itself like dreadlocks but at the end of it were snake heads hissing furiously. Her kimono disappeared as her body were covered with dark green scales, much like her first Satan's soul. A tail formed behind her with another snake head at the end. Her fingernails lengthened in claws. Green boots with high heels appeared around her legs. Her tongue became snake-like and white bandages warped itself round her eyes. Her 4 students stared at Mira Jane in shock. Mira, Lizana asked in shock, you have new Satan soul. She wasn't sure what should shock her more, Mira having another Satan soul or Mira being able to transform without saying anything. Yup, Mira said with smile, this is Satan's soul, Gorgona. Though it's just one of the new ones I collected during this 7 years, their eyes widened, how many of them you have? Kana asked. Mira got a thoughtful expression. They couldn't see her eyes but they saw her eyebrows furrow slightly as she put her index finger on her chin. The last time I count I had around 10, 12, Mira said after a short pause. Wow, Mira, that's amazing, Lizana said clasping her hands. I know, Mira said smirking. Well, that's enough talking. We should get started. Mira took her fighting stance as the snakes on her hair and tail hissed approvingly. Take over, Beast Soul, Elfman cried. Take over, Tiger, Lizana followed. Bixlo took his fighting stance as his babies surrounded him and Kana took her cards out of her pocket. Once her students took their fighting stance, Mira smirked again, her snake tongue licked her lower lip. Maybe I should take you seriously, she said. They looked at her confused as she reached to remove the bandages that covered her eyes. With Jalal ***, Jalal walked silently in front of the group as they followed him. Levi, Freed and Evergreen just watched their new teacher, without saying a word. They didn't know what to say since none of them knew him before they returned to the guild after 7 years. They were by now almost at the base of the mountain that was around an hour on foot away from the beach. He stopped suddenly as a waterfall came into view around 50 meters away. So, since none of you actually knows me, Jalal started but a certain 16-year-old boy interrupted him. I know you, Jalal rolled his eyes while Levi, Freed and Evergreen looked at Arthur in shock. When did he get here? Evergreen screeched. I was behind you the whole time, he said with blank face. You can't just sneak up on people whenever you feel like it. She continued. He's Natsu's student. That's for sure, Freed whispered to Levi, who giggled. Though Ever is right, how did you get here without us noticing? Freed asked curiously. Oh that, Arthur said as he melted in the shadows and then reappeared next to Jalal. I am able to enter the shadows using Shadow Walk, he said. Though I prefer Shadow Make over Shadow Walk, you can use 2 types of magic. Levi asked surprised. Well yay, but Shadow Walk is basically something you have to learn in order to know how to use Shadow Make, Arthur explained. Would you mind to show us? Freed asked. I mean Shadow Make magic. I never actually seen someone using it. Sure, Arthur said as he grinned. He took similar pose to Gray's when he uses Ice Make and shouted, Shadow Make, Black Tigers. Black tigers made entirely of shadows started rising from the shadows of the trees around the small clearing they were currently on. Their eyes glowed red as they roared and started running toward the group. Seconds before they reached them they dispelled. Levi, who was hiding behind Freed, said, Wow. That's pretty impressive. Arthur beamed happily but then added, though I can't use my magic if there aren't any shadows. That's why I usually goes with Annie on missions. Her illusions makes shadows and then I use my Shadow Make. The group continued to talk for few minutes before Jalal cleared his throat, successfully gaining their attention. As much as I enjoy the pleasant chat, we have work to do, he said. Others nodded in agreement. So I will be short. My name is Jalal Fernandez. I use heavenly body magic, darkness magic. I am able to use little of fire magic as well as abyss break, bind snake, which I will learn you how to use it since it's not that complicated and it's useful, few self-destruction spells, telekinesis, and I'm not that bad at telepathy. Levi, Evergreen and Freed stared at him in shock. Well, that's, wow, I mean, a lot of, Levi stuttered, not sure what to say. You don't see someone knew so many different magic types every day. Definitely impressive, Freed said. First I need to see how strong you are, he said, but then added when he saw they wanted to say something more, you don't have to tell me your names and magics, I already know them. Natsu told me. Oh, Evergreen said. So let's start, he said as he took his fighting stance. Freed, you go first. Freed looked at him after hearing his name and nods. I won't go easy on you, he said. Jalal smirked. I will on you. Freed glared at him as he charged. With Ultir Ultir levitated on her crystal ball as Annie, Lucy, Urza, Gray and Juvia followed her. So how are we gonna do this? Gray asked as he walked next to Ultir. You will spare against me, Ultir said as she hopped down from her crystal. Why did you stop? Lucy asked. Because we're here, Ultir said. Group looked around themselves. They were on another part of the beach, but it was more or less deserted with just few seagulls croaking around. Waves splashed on the shore lazily, scaring away seabirds that came too close. Ultir took her fighting stance as her crystal flew above her arm. Alright, now come at me, she said seriously. All at once? Lucy asked, surprised. Ultir smiled. Yay, don't worry, I won't hurt you. Too much. Lucy gulped while Urza glared at her. We won't hold back, right guys? Yeah. Gray said as he put his right hand in his outstretched left palm. It won't help you, though, Annie joked. I don't doubt that, Ultir said as they rushed toward her. With Natsu after they split in 4 groups and everyone took their own path, Natsu started walking without saying a word to his students. They quickly followed him. Where are we going? Happy asked after few moments of silence. Natsu pointed his finger lazily toward the forest few miles behind the beach. There, he said simply. Why forest? Laxus asked as he walked behind Natsu with his hand in his pockets. Wouldn't some clearing be better? I like forests, Natsu shrugged. Have a problem with that? He added with dangerous edge to his voice. Laxus stooped, walking for a second as he said quickly, and no. None at all. Gajil snickered and Wendy giggled. Big, bad Laxus is afraid of Natsu, Happy said with sly grin. Shut up. It's not like you've never been afraid of him, he hissed. Gajil just huffed while Wendy looked at Natsu with thoughtful expression. Now guys, don't fight with each other, Charla said from her spot between Wendy's arms. Wendy hugged her harder to her chest as she said with smile, we're not fighting, they are just having some childish discussion over whose demon is scarier. Natsu said with chuckle. The sound of Natsu's chuckle sounded so foreign to 3 dragon slayers. It will take more time for them to truly believe that 7 years have passed for them. But they all were talking about you, Lily said confused. Everyone sees their own demons in different ways. It doesn't matter if it is the same demon, Natsu said in a motionless voice. Others kept quiet. They couldn't say anything to that. They didn't know what to say to that. How fast are you? Natsu asked after few minutes of silence. His companions blinked at unexpected question. Huh, came their intelligent response. Natsu rolled his eyes. How fast can you run? Definitely faster than you, Laxus said smugly. Why would you think that? Natsu asked. His voice didn't change. Because I can go as fast as lightning, Laxus answered. Natsu chuckled but didn't say anything. Gajeel. Wendy. Me. Well, I'm sure I'm lot slower than you, but I think I'm not too slow, Wendy said, slightly embarrassed. I shouldn't be that much slower than you, Gajeel said to Natsu, shrugging his shoulders. Good, Natsu said and then smirked. Others tensed slightly when they saw it. It was one of those smirks they were pretty familiar with. It didn't change much through 7 years. It still sent shivers down their spines. How about a race toward the forest? He asked. If you get there before me, I will show you something special. You can get there in a second if you use Chaotic Void, Gajeel said in an annoyed tone. I promise I won't use it, Natsu said. So, I'm in, Laxus said. Count me in as well, Gajeel said. I'll try then as well, Wendy said with determined look. Hey, what about us? Happy cried out. You see the forest? Natsu asked and Happy nodded. Then go there as soon as you can, Natsu said simply. And then turned to face dragon slayers. Ready, Natsu said as he took his stance. They followed his example. Set, he said as he bent down his knees for better start. Go, he said with smirk, and before they could even blink he was gone. They stared at the place Natsu used to occupy few seconds ago. What the? Laxus asked dumbfounded. He said he wouldn't use Chaotic Void. Gajeel shouted angrily. He didn't use it. There wasn't any magic circle and he didn't voiced any spell, Wendy said. And beside he did leave footprints in the sand so that we can see that he ran here. Laxus's eyes widened before he transformed in lightning and started heading toward the forest. Why are we arguing here if he's already on his way? He yelled. Gajeel grumbled as he started running. Wendy sighed and followed after Gajeel. Half an hour later asterisk. Took you long enough, Laxus grumbled from his spot when Wendy got there the last one. He was sitting under a tree at the beginning of the forest with his back resting on the tree trunk. Sorry, she said after her breathing stabilized slightly. It's not a problem, Natsu said. He was in meditating position on a tree branch of the tree Laxus sat under. He didn't bother to open his eyes as he continued, though none of us came here before you, so you won't show us what I had in mind. Gajeel said. He was standing with his back leaning on another tree not far from Laxus and Natsu. That is true, Natsu said, finally opening his eyes. What was that you wanted to show us anyway? Laxus asked. I wanted to show you how I did that, Dragon Prince answered as he jumped from his branch. He was referring to his speed. Shouldn't you show us how you did that anyway? I mean, it could get useful in fight, Gajeel asked, slightly irritated. Natsu chuckled. I never said I wouldn't teach you how to do that, though you'll have to be a little bit more patient considering you were slower than me. Shouldn't we start training? Laxus asked. The sun will disappear from the sky before we know it. Natsu looked toward the sun. Indeed, then we should really start, Natsu said, and then he took his fighting stance. Come at me, all at once, he said. Others looked at him like he was crazy. You expect us to fight against you? Laxus asked incredulously. Yes, Natsu answered like it was the most obvious thing in the world. How else do you expect me to see how much I need to torture, I mean teach you? Dragon Slayers gulped at the wicked smile Natsu gave them, and besides, I didn't fight with any of you for more than 7 years, Laxus snorted, you'll regret it. I'm lot stronger than I was when we fought in Magnolia, you think I'm not? Natsu asked with smirk. Whatever, Laxus muttered. Let us begin, Natsu said, once again taking his stance. Laxus sighed as he pushed himself up and stood before Natsu, transforming in lightning to get there in barely a second. He then took his own fighting stance, waiting for others to get moving. Gajeel walked behind Natsu and didn't waste any time taking his stance. Wendy moved to Natsu's right side with determined look. They formed triangle around him. Natsu smirked. They stood there, at the edge of a dark forest, completely still. As the time itself stopped. Then on some unseen sign 3 dragon slayers launched themselves at the dragon prince. Laxus jumped in the air yelling, Lightning Dragon's Claw, as he warped his leg in lightning preparing for an axe kick down on Natsu's head. Natsu sidestepped casually as Laxus hit the ground causing pieces of it to fly in every direction. Gajeel, not even second later, was extending his arm in club targeting Natsu's head. Natsu's eyes quickly traveled toward Gajeel's rapidly extending arm. He bent his body backwards slightly to avoid being hit just as he heard Wendy's yell, "Sky Dragon's roar." He grabbed Gajeel's arm and pulled him toward himself. Gajeel's eyes widened in shock as Natsu bent down and threw Gajeel over his head right at Wendy's attack, using him like a shield. Gajeel was blown away to the nearby tree, breaking it down once he made contact. There was chippering sound of electricity as Laxus shouted, "Lightning Dragon's breakdown fist." Natsu looked at the incoming fist of lightning with bored expression as he jumped high in the air over the attack. The attack continued moving as Laxus's and Wendy's eyes widened. Gajeel, look out! Gajeel, who just now stood up, looked toward Wendy and Laxus only for his eyes widened in panic as the fist hit him, sending him crashing in another tree. "I don't even need to do anything. You'll do the job for me," Natsu said with smirk as he appeared right behind Laxus. His smirk then turned in more malicious grin as he said, "Though it would be no fun to watch you have all the fun while beating each other up." Laxus used his lightning body to get away from Natsu when he heard his voice behind his back. "Hey," Natsu asked when Laxus ran away from him. "Am I really that scary?" he asked, with fake hurt expression. Laxus looked at him, giving him "isn't that obvious" look. Natsu shrugged. Laxus opened his mouth to say something, but sudden, "Iron Dragon's lance, demon logs." Natsu turned his head just in time to see Gajeel turns his arm into a large spearhead, from which a large number of steel spears are fired towards him. Natsu was about to dodge it, but then he realized that the attack would probably hit Laxus and Wendy. Gajeel seemed to notice this as well, immediately regretting his attack. Natsu sighed as he slammed his hands in the ground, yelling, "Shadow make shield." Shadows around Natsu merged in one spot before rising from the ground, making a flower-shaped shield much like Gray's ice shield. The steel spears rushed toward the shield, and once they made contact with it, instead of bouncing back they went off it, much to others' horror. Their horror soon turned into surprise when the spears that passed off the shield disintegrated in dust barely few seconds later. When the attack stopped, Natsu dusted his hands and sighed. "I guess time to teach you guys something," he said, and then disappeared from their sight only to reappear in front of Gajeel, his fist warped ready to strike the Iron Dragon Slayer with Chaos Dragon's Iron Fist. The attack hit his target right in the stomach, rotating him for 180 degrees, sending him at the Lightning Dragon Slayer. Gajeel's eyes widened as he coughed out blood and crashed in Laxus. Lesson number 1. Never put your nakama in danger just to defeat your enemy. Gajeel groaned as he slowly stood up. Laxus followed and then glared at Natsu. "I gonna beat your ass for making fun of me," he roared as he rushed at Natsu with his fist pulled back, warped in lightning, ready to strike the dragon. Natsu dodged Laxus's attack and caught his fist, twisting it over his back, making Laxus fall flat on his back in front of Natsu. Lesson number 2. Think before you act. If your opponent is stronger than you, then don't try to defeat him by sheer brute force. Make a plan, a strategy. Natsu looked around. Wendy was busy healing Gajeel. She didn't make any attempt to attack him. He turned his head back to look at Laxus, who was about to stood up, but Natsu stopped him by saying, "Requip." Midnight's blade, long, pitch-black katana with purple dragon design appeared in Natsu's hands as he pinned the tip of the blade at Laxus's throat, barely avoiding piercing his neck. Lesson number 3. Disable your enemy and show no mercy. To empathize what he said, he let go some of his magic leak out of his body. 3 dragon slayers looked at Natsu with pale faces, barely hiding their fear after he said the last part. They nodded. Laxus barely even moved his head. Natsu nodded, seemingly satisfied, as the black katana disappeared from his hands. Laxus stood up, rubbing his throat. Gajeel got in sitting position, rubbing his stomach, while Wendy stood beside him. Natsu looked at them and then sighed, rubbing his forehead. "We have a lot of work to do." He removed the hand from his forehead and then grinned crazily. "So we better start." Sunset asterisk. As the sun started falling behind the mountain, 4 training groups started making their way toward the beach. Altair's group, namely Annie, Lucy, Urza, Gray and Juvia, got back to the beach first. Tired looks on their faces as their eyes barely stayed open. Altair walked behind the group with smile, fuming some melody they didn't recognize. As soon as the group got to the beach, they dropped on the sand, not wanting to move a muscle. Altair laughed as she sat down beside them. "What's the meter?" Gray groaned as he sat up. Your training. Don't you think making us catch a kelpie was little too much after you beat us to the ground? I'm not talking about a dog. Kelpie is a name of mythological creature that looks like horse and lives in water. You can enter, mythological creature kelpie, in the search box if you want better picture. Ultir laughed. Oh come on, it was funny to see the looks on your faces when we find him. I had no idea that stupid horse could be that fast. And not to mention that Aquarius blow me back to the shore instead of helping me, Lucy whined. Well you were lucky, Ultir said with her index finger raised in air like she was telling something really smart and important. You could have ended up with Natsu or Mira. Why would Mira be a problem? Urza asked sitting up. You have no idea, came a new voice. They all turned around to see Elfman, Lizana, Kana and Bixlo with Mira beside them coming toward them. They all were completely wet with several wounds that oddly resembled to snake bites. It was Elfman who spoke to them. They looked just as tired as Ultir's group. She's a demon, Kana said as she slumped down next to Juvia. That's an understatement, Bixlo muttered as he threw himself on the sand. Why thank you. That's so sweet of you, Mira said with smile. What did you do to them? Ultir asked with raised eyebrow though she got the idea. They fought against me whole day on the cliff not so far from here. Though for some reason they fell from it quite often, she said the last part with thoughtful expression and finger on her chin. More like she throw us off of it, Lizana said. Ultir's group looked at them with pale expressions. I bet my group will be stronger than yours, Mira said with smug expression. Ultir smirked as she said, dream on. I could tell the same thing to you, like you, Mira was interrupted by Jalal's voice. Now ladies, no fighting, remember what you promised to Natsu, he said with smile as the two girls nodded while muttering something. Levi, Freed, Evergreen and Arthur walked behind him. While they didn't look as tired as the other two groups they were obviously exhausted. Levi sat down next to Lucy and said, Hey Lou. Hey Levi, Lucy asked in sleepy voice, what did you guys do today? We spared against Jalal first. And he kind of beat all of us in less than a minute. She said as she giggled, and for the rest of the day he tested our stamina, speed, brain power and all those other stuff. Lucky you, Lucy muttered as she lied down on the sand. What about you? Levi asked. Lucy moaned as she covered her face with her face and said, first she beat us to the ground and then she made us catch some beast though I was doing more run for my life than catching that stupid horse. Levi asked confused. Kelpie, Lucy said. Levi cringed. Yikes, Lucy nodded. Jalal, hearing this turned to Ultir with frown. You shouldn't do that on their first day, Ultir shrugged. You could have waited for at least tomorrow. I gonna go in griffin hunt with my group tomorrow, he said. Levi hearing this paled as Lucy chuckled. She turned to Lucy with pout. That's mean Lou. Sorry, Lucy said with giggle. So only Natsu's is missing now, Jalal asked as he looked around. Ultir and Mira nodded and then three friends laughed. I must say I feel sorry for them, Mira said after she stopped laughing. Why is that? Evergreen asked. Well, you'll see, Ultir said with smirk. On the second thought, I don't think I really wanna know, Evergreen said. By now the sun has almost completely disappeared from the sky. Though where is Natsu for so long? Jalal asked. Someone called my name, Natsu asked as he stepped out of magic circle after using chaotic void. Speak of the devil, Jalal said with smirk. Others looked toward Natsu and paled slightly, except Jalal, Mira and Ultir. Are they okay? Lucy asked. Natsu raised an eyebrow and then realized what she was talking about. When he walked out of the circle he was carrying Wendy on his back. He held Gajiel by the back of his shirt like a cat holds a dead mouse and Laxus was dragged behind him by his collar. Cats walked behind him and other than a terrible headache caused by the spell they were looking fine. They should be fine, Natsu replied as he dropped Laxus and Gajiel not so nicely. He then lied down Wendy carefully. Yay right, you almost killed us, Laxus grumbled from his spot surprising others that he was awake. I never said that you are fine right now. Though I hope you'll get better by tomorrow considering that this was just a warm-up, Laxus, being the only one awake of the three dragon slayers, paled. He sat up groaning as he did so and turned his head to look at Natsu. You can't be serious, Natsu turned his eyes to Laxus and deadpanned. I am, and with that Laxus passed out, something that strangely resembled to a soul coming out of his mouth. Natsu chuckled and then turned to look at others. He became serious when he saw everyone's, except Altair, Mira and Jalal, who just shook their heads, pale faces, and asked, "What? Do I still have some blood on my face?" He asked. "I thought I wiped all of it." That question didn't really help as others turned even paler. "What did you do to them?" Gray asked, looking as Altair and Mira stuffed Laxus's soul back in his mouth. "Well, let's see," Natsu said, thoughtful expression. "First they raced to the forest," Happy said, and then added with snicker, "He came there before they even started running. Then I sparred with them," Natsu said, "and taught them few lessons along the way." That doesn't sound so bad," Levi said. "You never seen his way of teaching, right?" Jalal asked, and when she shook her head, "No," he added, "believe me. It is far worse than bad. After that I sparred with them using the black gates of sin," Natsu said. At that even Jalal lost the color in his face. "Don't you think that's a little too much for their first day? Those two could defeat Zerif's demon in a matter of seconds even without you, Black Gate of Sin." Lucy asked, confused, trying to ignore the last comment Jalal made. Natsu waved his hand as he said, "It's actually celestial magic though, fused with demons' curses. Can I see the keys of the Black Gates?" Lucy asked as she stood up and walked to Natsu, who nodded and held open his palm as two black keys appeared on his palm. First key had a rose in its stalk with sharp thorns littered on it, warped around its handle and the top of the handle. It was covered with red markings that formed some kind of complicated drawings. "This one is known as Yokubo the Lust," Natsu explained. "Yokubo is also known as the yellow-eyed demon, the demon spirit of illusions." He then pointed at his other key. This one, while also black, strangely resembled to Loki's key, but instead of lion's head there was foxes. "And this one is called Haradachi the Wrath," he said, "spirit of fire and hell's infernos." Lucy nodded as she looked at strange keys. "To which set do they belong? I never even heard about them." "These are the 2 keys out of 7 from Black Gates of Sin," he said as he started to put the keys away in his dimensional pocket. "No, wait," Lucy yelled a little too loud for her own taste. Natsu stopped and looked at her with raised eyebrow. "Could you call them out? I mean, I would like to see them, and I would also like for Loke to see them." Natsu continued looking at her for few more seconds before he sighed. "I guess it wouldn't hurt to summon them once again today, now would it?" Lucy smiled as she took out Loki's key and said, "Gate of the Leon, I open thee, Leo." There was a sound of a bell and familiar golden light shined. Loke appeared in his suit and looked at Lucy. "You called, Princess?" Lucy turned her head to Natsu and said, "I called you so you could see celestial spirits Natsu has." Loke turned to Natsu in surprise. "You can summon celestial spirits?" Natsu nodded and then said, "Yes, though not all of them." They looked at him confused. "I am only able to summon spirits of Black Gates because they don't require pure soul of the user as other keys," he explained. "For how long you can do that? I mean, how long you know celestial magic?" Loke asked, interested. "It's not celestial magic, it's celestial curses, and I know it since I'm 7, he said, "but I didn't use it before because I didn't have the keys." Loke nodded and then said, "Could you summon them now? I'm rather curious since I never heard about Black Gates." "Wait, not even you heard about it?" Urza asked as she walked next to Loke. "No, this is the first I heard about them," he answered. "It is not a surprise really. I myself would have never heard about them if Lilith didn't told me." "Lilith?" Altair asked, now interested in conversation. "She's a fallen angel from Lurioa," Natsu explained. "I met her not long after Acnologia brought me there for the first time. She's the one who taught me that magic." They didn't say anything after that for several seconds as they all knew what happened when Acnologia brought him there. Natsu then took out Yokubo's key and said in calm voice, "Black Gates of Lust, I open thee, Yokubo," as he said that the markings on the key glowed and a hole opened in the ground. From the hole, shadows rose and materialized into a black cat the size of a big dog with red lines covering its body. Cat looked around and then turned to look at Natsu, asking in female voice, "Why am I being summoned?" The cat then smiled evilly as it disappeared in shadows and reappeared beside Gray. The cat warped its tail around Gary as she asked, "To have some fun with the boys again?" She purred as she transformed into a beautiful woman in her 20s. She had long red tight dress that showed off her curves rather nicely. She had long red nails and there was a black tail still swaying behind her back. Her black hair was straight and it reached her lower back, and there were 2 cat ears on her head. Purring, she added, "I like this one a lot better than that metal head. He was no fun." Gray's face became red as Yokubo traced her fingers over his chest. Juvia on the other hand was red but not from embarrassment, she was red from anger as dark aura formed around her. Love rival, she kept muttering. Yokubo looked at Juvia after hearing her as the cat smiled and walked to Juvia. As she reached her she transformed into a hot young man in red suit. You like what you see? Yokubo asked in male voices. He put his hand on Juvia's waist and pulled her closer. Juvia looked at the man and then at Gray, who looked at Yokubo in shock. Others had similar faces while Natsu just face-palmed himself. Could you just stop messing around? He said as he took out Haradachi's key and said, Black Gates of Wrath, I open thee. Haradachi. Yobuko hearing this reverted back to her cat form as she ran to Natsu's side. As Natsu said this, red flames burst into flames in existence. When the flames died down there stood a fox the size of a horse with black flame-like tattoos swirling around its body. Haradachi looked at Natsu and asked in male voice, what do you want? I'm not going to deal with another weaklings today. Natsu gestured with his arm toward his companions and said, I'm just showing them demon spirits. Haradachi nodded and then looked at Yobuko, and I assume she is her for the same reason. Hi, Yobuko stuttered. Others looked confused at that while Natsu rolled his eyes. You didn't try anything perverted again, Yobuko? Haradachi asked as his eyes flashed red. No, of course not, she said quickly and then looked at Natsu and smiled nervously. I'll take my leave now, and with that she melted in the shadows. She did something, am I right? Haradachi asked, not expecting anyone the answer. He sighed and then noticed others were still staring at him. What are you staring at? Never seen a talking fox? He asked angrily. No, not really, Gray asked, not sure what to say. Idiots, the fox said and then turned to Natsu. I will go back and have a talk with Yobuko, and with that the fox was also gone. Natsu sighed as he putted the keys in his dimensional pocket. They are interesting, Loke said with somewhat confused face. They are troublesome if you ask me, Natsu said and then added looking at the sky, we should get going back to the camp. It's getting rather late. Others nodded in agreement as they started walking toward the camp, the question what Natsu did to the 3 dragon slayers forgotten. Maybe it was better that way. Natsu took responsibility of taking care of the dragon slayers. He put Wendy on his back. In his right hand he took a hold of Gajil in a similar way he held him when he brought them, and took Laxus's collar in his other hand, dragging him as he walked beside the group talking to his 2 mates. They all took their respective tents, Urza, Lucy and Levi in 1, Gray, Elfman and Gajil in 2nd, Laxus, Freed, Bixlo in 3rd, Natsu, Jalal, Altir and Mira in 4th, Kana, Evergreen and Juvia in 5th, Wendy, Lizana and Katz in 6th. The next day 7 a.m. as other woke up slowly they were greeted by familiar sight. Mira and Urza was awake preparing the breakfast, greeting them with, good morning. Altir was awake putting plates on the table and Natsu was meditating under a palm tree. He could have helped them from time to time, Kana muttered. If you look closer at him you will notice how exhausted he actually is, Jalal spoke behind her, startling her. She looked at him in confusion. What are you talking about? When was the last time you saw him asleep? Jalal answered with another question. Kana looked at him as she tried to remember when she saw the last time Natsu sleeping. After few seconds she realized she saw him asleep the last time after they returned from Tower of Heaven. If you could even call that asleep, since he was more in coma than actually asleep. He is meditating so often in order to make up for lost sleep, Jalal explained. Kana nodded as she made her way to help Altir. When Lucy woke up most of the group was already awake and the breakfast was ready. Why didn't you wake me up sooner? I could have helped you set the table at least, she asked as she sat at the table. Don't worry about it, Mira said with smile. It's not a big problem to set the table. Altir nodded in agreement as she smiled. Lucy smiled as she said, okay then. After another 10 minutes everyone were awake ready for a new day. Altir then looked at Natsu and sighed before she yelled, hey Natsu. Get here, breakfast is ready. Natsu opened his right eye as Altir's voice broke his concentration. He sighed as he stood up. I'm coming, he muttered. He was about to take his seat when a sound of bell stopped him. Everyone looked confused as Virgo appeared in golden light. She had worried expression on her face as she said in serious tone, Princess. Lucy jumped on her feet and others soon followed. Confused and worried, or in Natsu's case emotionless, expressions were on their faces. Celestial World had some unexpected visitors, the pink-haired spirit said seriously. Did they attack you? Lucy asked worriedly. Virgo smiled, confusing the others even further. No, she then gestured to her right as golden light shined again. They are here to see you. Some old friends of yours actually. Yo, came a familiar voice as golden light disappeared, leaving 12 people. Others looked at the visitors with wide eyes. Long time no see, Soul Eater, said a certain pink-haired dragon slayer. Dragneel, Natsu asked with raised eyebrow to hide his surprise. Other fairy tale members stared dumbfounded at 12 counterparts. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. The next part will be out soon.